happened a few times, so.
Welcome everyone to Latte Night, the Dice Coffee podcast, and today we have another very wonderful guest. Author, nerd, father, all-around great guy, B. Dave Walters. Yeah, I wish I had a soundboard.
Yes,
Woo!
We'll take care of it.
Most of you...
Uh,
I wish I had that sound effect, I really do. Most of you
It'll be great.
would know him from possibly as the author of A Darkened Wish, personal favorite, and I actually love the stream of that on YouTube. Some of you might know him from the Silver and Steel stream on the D&D channel, and most of the community would probably know him as the undisputed Baron of the Valley on LA by Night.
Undisputed.
So, given that we are a tabletop channel primarily, I want to start off by asking you for your earliest experience with tabletop. Like, what was your first game? When was this? And how has that affected you in some way as a person?
I've been playing since I was 13. The first game I played was Rifts, and I keep looking over there because all my Rifts books are right over there. But outgrew Rifts pretty quickly because if you don't know that game, every book came out with something stronger than the book before it, and it just like the power creep was insane. Yep. Got into Dungeons and Dragons 2nd edition. After that, I've been playing nonstop since then. Played. There hasn't been a time in my life that I haven't been tabletop gaming since then. Then when I was 12th grade of high school, got into werewolf. I actually got into werewolf before I got into vampire. I got into vampire in college. And those things have just been a part of my life ever since. You know, groups come and go or get together for a little while. I think the longest stable group I had is I DM'd a group of Pathfinder from level 1 to level 20 in all the mythic tiers. That took us about 4 years. Between that, just in and out, poking at it all along, and was in the right place at the right time when this like renaissance started, and I've just been riding the wave ever since.
Funny you should mention Renaissance. There's something I wanted to touch up on. That is, a lot of people, as you might know, attribute the recent popularity of Dungeons and Dragons to Critical Role and how they play things. But I think what gets overlooked is how newbie friendly the 5th edition of Dungeons and Dragons is. And since you came from 2nd edition, I believe you have come across the term FACO or FACO.
Once or twice. Back in my day, you had to calculate THACO and the bin bars, lift gates. You know.
So much
fun.
So, I was just curious as where on the spectrum you lied on, because there are purists who believe that this is the way to do things and this is the only way to play, and then there are the new people who think that the new rules are great because they're simpler, they're easier to understand. So, like, where on that spectrum would you lie, given that you started so early?
Well, one, let me ask you a super noob question, the noobest of noob questions. Can people see me, or is this all audio?
Oh, people can see you. If that matters.
Because I lost your camera. I can't see you, Nigel, so I don't know if nobody can see you, but I can't see you. That's cool. Cool. Just making sure. I really like 5th edition. I would not describe myself a purist, but I was one of those people that completely skipped 4th edition. When there was the mass exodus of people that that kept playing 3 and 3.5 that gave birth to Pathfinder, I was one of those people. That group I just mentioned that I DM'd from 1 to 20 was during that time. And I was a relatively late adopter of 5th edition because it was 2013 it came out. It probably was 2016, 2017 before I gave it a chance. So it's been some years now. But just when they were like, yay, more D&D, I was one of those people that was like, nah, no thanks. And the thing that really won me over was the advantage and disadvantage system. I thought that was super ingenious.
Yep.
I think this now is the best the game has ever been. I think it's the best time to start. 2nd edition was super hard. And recently I've done a couple of like flashback nostalgia streams type things where we went back and played 2nd edition or played Tomb of Annihilation.
Oh, we really need the links for those. We need the links for those.
No, I'll send them to you. But man, it was just brutal. And it's funny because as a person, I am not a nostalgic person. I have no real concept of nostalgia. Like, I enjoy things when I'm there, and then when I'm not there anymore, and like, I don't look back wistfully for like bygone days. I'm kind of only moving forward. And so the idea, like how they just put out the old like vanilla World of Warcraft, I'm like, no, I played it the first time. No thanks. And sure enough, people were like reporting bugs and things that were just how the game used to be. I think all things being equal, things improve over time with development. You can get to a point that you can't sharpen a sword anymore, of course. But I think 5th edition is the best the game has ever been, and definitely the best time to be trying to play it.
Yeah, absolutely. Funny, there's a thing that I remember you DMing about a year or over a year ago, the Theogony of Kairos, which
Yes.
was something I really enjoyed watching. For those of you who are unaware, the Theogony of Kairos is this stream that Dave here DM'd for, and it was a bunch of normal, ordinary people who were gifted with godlike abilities and overnight just became these level 20 adventurers who could basically kill things with the snap of a finger, but they couldn't because you set up a world where everything they do has these massive consequences that they're going to have to deal with again. So I wanted to pick your brain because you are sort of the for me, you're the authority on high level D&D gaming, just starting people off at 20. You've done a lot of that. I wanted to ask you, how do you approach something like that? Like giving these players basically godlike power, and how do you approach that kind of setup? Because most people will do it from level 1 to barely any campaign goes past level 15, really. So
yeah. Well, hey, first of all, thank you for watching and being a part of my like crazy wild ride over these past few years. Yeah. Right now, Theogony of Kairos is hard to find, but if you DM me on Twitter, my DMs are open. Honestly, if you got a question about anything I say on here, just hit me up on Twitter at bdavewalters. I'll give you the link to Theogony of Kairos. Yeah. That was the first stream I DM'd. Really proud of the work we did there. That gave birth to the Uncommon Trust and all the things we've done since. And yeah, the level 20 is my jam because fewer than 5% of campaigns ever even have level 20 players in them. That is not counting the ones that start at 1 and go there. That's just period, even have that. And so it has been my niche that I've carved out for myself of those are the kind of stories that I want to play and show, because I think people have a flawed understanding where they think the game ends at 20 and it doesn't at all. And I think the reason why I was so clearly able to see that is I have a background in the martial arts. I've trained in a bunch of different styles, earned a few black belts, and people think it's like, oh, you got your black belt, you're done. It's like, no, you got your black belt, that means you've started. So I think I always saw high level play like that. And yeah, with Theogony of Kairos, I originally thought that that we started them with level 0, not even level 1, level 0, because the station we were on at the time, the channels rather, the Twitch channel, one of the proprietors just like really had this thing with like wanting level 0 to be a thing, level 0 play. That was just their own personal mission. So I was like, no problem. I'll help with that. We'll start as peasants. And I actually thought we were only going to go about an episode. And the reason why I did it like that was I knew if I just started them with all the powers and I was like, oh, that's the bully. He's been picking on you since you were 3. Cool. Fireball, But if I took the time to show that world and show the people in it, that when they basically became gods, they would care. And I also had to put faces on all those people, so when I imperiled them, it would matter. If I was just told you that it's like, oh, okay, the city's on fire, it's like no big deal. But the bakery that is owned by the family of your girlfriend's on fire, that hits different. So that's why I took the time to set all that up. And quite frankly, it worked. As far as the level 20 play, the game at that point becomes less about what can you do, and it becomes more about what should you do. And I sat down and I told them, I was like, your characters literally have world-altering power. You can summon tidal waves and destroy entire kingdoms. Like, you can do anything. Like, you can drop a meteor swarm on an army, kill a lot of people. Like, you can do that. Just understand afterwards there's going to be things like a refugee crisis, you know? Like, what are you going to do with the people that have survived, you know, your assault? Their allies are going to come and attack you. And if an army of 10,000 people is shooting arrows at you, no matter how tough you are, statistically speaking, 2,000 of them are going to roll natural 20s and you are going to be dead. So, you know, plan accordingly. And yeah, and it worked. And I really enjoyed that story. And I drew a lot on that experience when I wrote A Darkened Wish of showing them, you know, in battle as high-level characters and what that really meant. That's why on the second page, you see Helene drop a meteor swarm on an army and blowing people up, because that's what would happen. And I think that's really cool.
It was.
And that's how that all came to be.
Actually amazing.
Yeah,
I want to play that.
It was really cool. Just meteor swarm second page. It's like, whoa.
Mm-hmm.
Don't even have
So what
enough.
do I do now?
Well,
I don't even
Yeah,
have enough dice
exactly.
for meteor swarm.
It's the, you know, hey, that's well, digital dice are useful, but it's very exciting to roll, you know,
40d6.
30d6 or whatever insanity there is, yeah, and just watch it all go. 40d6,
So
yep,
much-
20 and
So
20.
much addition.
Yeah, no, but it's fun, and I like that though. I like high powered heroism things. I mean, I've told street level stories, but all things being equal, street level's not what I enjoy. I like the fate of the world, or the fate of many worlds. Planes hangs in the balance.
The
From what we
difference
do. That's
between
just my style here.
the difference between Batman and Superman.
Exactly the difference between Batman and Superman. Although Batman has saved all the worlds. His own Crisis on Infinite Earths, when he had to fight Owlman to save all the worlds. He's done it. But yes, all things being equal, yes.
I think Jay wanted to ask you something about your DMing experience.
Yeah,
please.
I would like to ask, if you could pick one, what is your most memorable experience as a DM?
I'll give you two.
Okay.
One of which just happened. The other was a little while back. So I'll tell you the one from a little while back first. In that same Pathfinder game I mentioned, we had a character who was a dragon slayer. That was his character concept. And from, you know, at level 1, you're not slaying any dragons. So fairly early, he got an arrow of slaying shot, which what that does for people that aren't familiar with Pathfinder, or quite frankly 3.5, is you shoot the target. Well, it works on a certain type of creature. So it was an arrow of slaying shot specifically calibrated for dragons. It was Bard's black arrow from The Hobbit is what it was. But you have to make a saving throw or you die. And the saving throw is super, super, super low. So it's pretty easy to beat. And I only played with one house rule, and that's a 1 always fails and a 20 always succeeds, even on skill checks, because I like to simulate the fact that there's always a chance. Like, you're never so good at something you can't mess up. Things are never so hopeless that you can't get lucky. So I gave him this arrow, maybe level 6, something. And then about a year, maybe 18 months into our playing, I had this encounter where a dragon was going to attack the city they were in. And I had it mapped out like round for round for round. Like round 1, the dragon's going to come and do this, you know, and then it needs to fly and turn around. And then it's going to come back and do this. And then it's going to turn around and then it's going to land. And I had it all mapped out. And he, when I described the dragon's approach, he was like, I'm going to shoot it with my arrow of slaying shot, which quite frankly, I forgot he had, because it had been like a year. And I was like, there's no way this is going to work. And he was like, there's no way this is going to work, but I got to shoot it at him. Finally, here's a dragon. He goes to shoot, natural 20. I'm like, okay, you definitely hit. Let me make the save. I roll 1. And I just looked down at it and I showed it to him. And at the table, they all start screaming. Like literally round 1, action 1 of what was supposed to be this huge thing, shot it out of the sky. Just bang, boom. And he still talks about that. They all still talk about that. And I was like, yeah. Hey, dice say that's what happened. You literally dropped a dragon with a single arrow. Because stories like that, that's why we play those games. Those moments are why we do this. And I realized even in that moment, I could have done something to try and take it from him to like preserve my narrative, but then it just would have been just another encounter. Like letting him win, as the dice said he won, is what made that meaningful. The other thing, and this was just maybe 2 months ago on my Patreon, same thing. I had given them, they'd gained access to a wish in our World of Darkness story. Ooh. And the way I handle wishes is very much the Twilight Zone monkey paw school of wishes. Like, you will get what you ask for, but you will get exactly what you ask for, and I'm going to twist it as much as I can. So I'd set up this bad guy, vampire, who was thousands of years old. I built him expressly to be a vampire that werewolves need to be afraid of, because if you're familiar with the World of Darkness, like, vampires for the most part have no chance against werewolves. It's like fighting the Incredible Hulk. So I'd built him he was a big game hunter. He was Gaston. He was evil Gaston who hunted werewolves. And I'd been building him up for months. He'd done all these terrible things, and we were coming down to the final battle with him, where I figured they were going to kill him that time, but he was going to kill a few of them. Like, I just had come to the table like, it's time for you guys to get worked. So they, to their credit, had planned out a whole thing. They had a trap for him. It was like Predator, and they're doing all these things. And they dropped the wish on him. And I found out that a group of them had been working for 6 weeks to figure out how to word the wish so carefully that I could not use it against them. And they said it to me.
Did it work?
And I literally was like... They took all these screenshots of me thinking of, like, what can I do? Like, how can I use this against them? And they done it. It was watertight. And basically what they wished is they took his powers away. They worded it properly, but they took his powers away and proceeded to just smash him because he was powerless. But that moment, again, with all of them like, we did it, yay! And I was like, okay. All right, you guys, you were prepared. You got me. I'm hard to get, but you got me. Yeah. Those are 2 very high points for me.
Hold on. I'm just assuming you're a fan of Critical Role. Like, you watch it sometimes, maybe.
Yeah.
You know that scene that happened with Jester giving a blueberry cupcake to this hag that Matt prepared for months about this encounter, and she gave it to her, and she used modify memory and just skipped the entire encounter, and they were joking about that's an entire map we're never gonna get to see. That kind of resembles your face right now.
Yeah, man. No, but that happens, and when it happens, you just kind of gotta roll with it. You're like, well, okay, because it's the players will trick you and the dice will trick you. You can only plan so much. Yeah.
DJ, think you want to ask something?
Yeah. Actually, on our game, we try to do something like that. Also, we try not to use some abilities and items frequently, so that our DM here, Nigel, would overlook it when creating some scenarios. Also,
forget about it.
Yeah, we're well trained like that.
Unfortunately, sometimes we also forget about our items. So it goes both ways, really.
Yep, definitely.
So, most of our campaigns are RP heavy. I would like to ask you, for that 4 years that you have DM'd a campaign, how do you keep it refreshing or exciting for your players?
One thing that I believe, and I'm always talking about, sorry, I'm being attacked by a moth here. I don't know why, they go crazy right about this time of day. DM's job is to elicit an emotional reaction. So as long as your players are happy or sad, if they're nodding along, if they're afraid, if they're angry, just anything, as long as they're experiencing an emotion, you're doing your job. And playing these games, the difference between a tabletop game and a stream is when you are playing a home game, getting together, eating together, talking about work, talking about Netflix, complaining about your girlfriend, your boyfriend, all of that is part of it. That's all part of the fellowship. A stream has all of that carved out of it. And it is just the raw game. So I think being aware of maintaining the social bond of it that goes around it is important. And also giving people a chance to do things that matters, because I think that ultimately is why people play these games and why video games will never completely replace tabletop, is you want to have a chance to do things that matter, that your character's action or inaction matters and has an impact on the story that you can define and move forward. Like you were just saying about the Critical Role thing, that she was able to go around the hag and that was just that. Video games aren't like that. I mean, you can skip quest chains, of course, but the idea that the game fully intended it to be one way and a single choice of yours makes it all not that way, that is very unique to this. And I think as long as people are getting a chance to feel like their character matters, they'll keep showing up. And if you feel like people start kind of tuning out or losing interest, the first thing is for the DM to just kind of run through your mind, when was the last time you kind of passed them the ball at a key moment? Or, worst case, just ask, like, hey, where are you trying to go with your character? What are you trying to do? Where do you hope their story ends? And just kind of work together, because it is a collaborative art. I will also say, another tip for my DMs is don't feel like you have to explain absolutely everything. Very much be like, you come into a castle and it is the most beautiful thing that you've ever seen. Jay, tell me what it looks like, and let you describe, things like when you kill a monster, it's like, you describe for me its grisly demise, and then let them say it. Those are the things that get people hooked in and they care because they feel like they have a part of it.
Okay. That's a good point that you made about trying to elicit emotion and draw it out of people in the games. That is a good tangent of something I want to talk to you about, is that there is there is this thing, a recurring theme that I've noticed, and it's also happened to me in my childhood, where Dungeons and Dragons was used as a therapeutic tool, somewhat. It was used for people to be able to practice and express emotions without the real world consequences, because you're leaving it in there, but the emotions are always real. So I wanted to ask about if you've experienced that yourself, or have seen that experience happen to other people, where they were able to grow as a person because of their character that they made, that was maybe their character was stronger than they actually are, or more provocative, or more aggressive than they are, and they learned a little bit of that from them?
Countless times, especially on my Patreon, I've had multiple people say to me aside, is like, I actually changed because of this. I learned something about myself because of this. Because the World of Darkness in particular, it's a storytelling game of personal horror. Even though it seems like everything is all right for a time, the reality is it isn't. It's a world of darkness. The backdrop of Vampire in particular is you're struggling to hold on to a piece of yourself that you will lose. Over time, your humanity keeps dropping. And when your humanity drops to zero, you become a wight. You're a monster. It's inevitable. Literally every vampire will die or be a monster. The game very much soft sells that. You have to read between the lines and think about it to realize that it's true. So ultimately, the state of being a vampire is a very hopeless one. And yet you have to find a way to have some hope in the midst of that. And in our games, I have given people opportunities to do things like, confront the sire that hurt them, to say goodbye to the love that they lost. Because we, in my stories, things like time travel and all kinds of craziness has come up, and I'm always careful with how I portray parents, that unless someone tells me outright, you know, my mother or my father was terrible because of X, Y, and Z, I always have parents be cool, because in life, not everybody got to have parents that were cool. And we did one where same thing, they were going through time, kind of seeing their own past, and a person saw their father, and when they were leaving, he just said, "I'm proud of you, son," and they left, and the player just kind of started crying. And then I didn't push it, and then they messaged me later that their real father had never said that to them, and just something about it just hit them so hard. And, you know, being able to stand up and be brave, even fictitiously, when you're afraid, has a real meaningful impact. Seeing yourself become strong and influential in a community has a real impact. Sometimes this is not always positive, because sometimes, you know, that's where bleed comes from, where, you know, your real emotions kind of muddy with your character emotions, and it can kind of be tough to snap out of. But there's a positive aspect of that too, where the happy memories and the things you learn about yourself also kind of filter over into real life. So yeah, I've seen it lots and lots and lots of times, and it's beautiful, because like anything, the trick of our brain is your brain doesn't know the difference between something that is real and something that you're imagining. That's why worrying is such a negative habit, because to your brain it's happening. You know, to your body it's happening. The stress and the high blood pressure and the tension are real. So you suffer twice. You suffer in your imagination, and then you suffer in reality. So that's why worrying is pointless. But flip side to that is true also, that it doesn't know when something good is happening. So and this is another thing, this is a real trick of neurology, that if you're feeling down in the dumps, very vividly imagining the last time you truly felt happy really can alter your memory. That's why exercise makes you feel better. The act of moving your body around releases endorphins. It makes you feel better. So it's a double-edged sword. Sometimes the sad memories can cross over into real life, but sometimes the happy emotions can't too.
That brings us to another point here, is because we've been talking about the world of darkness lately, let's address, I'll call it the elephant in the room, your role on LA by Night. First, I wanted to ask, what is the disparity between you and the character Victor Temple? Like, how big is the difference in terms of personality?
Victor's me. Victor's me. Like that's why it's so easy to put that role on. Like, no, I'm that dude. I mean, if I got bitten by a vampire tonight, I feel like I'd have his life in 15ish years. And I did that on purpose, because when I created Victor, I knew I wanted to play a Ventru, because they're my favorite clan. And I knew we were the ones that were going to introduce Clan Ventru to a new generation of people. And I took the fact that I would be the face of my beloved clan very seriously. So much so, in the Vampire Player's Guide, in the Ventru section, there is a letter. And I can't talk about it too much, I start getting emotional. But there's a letter in it to a new Ventru. And the last line of it is, "We're all watching, make us proud." And I distinctly remember reading that after I knew that was going to happen. And I got like all emotional about it. And again, I have to change the subject, or it's going to happen right now, because I took that very seriously. And I knew I wanted to portray him as a businessman. I also know in the media, most of the times you see black males with money, it's illicit money, it's crime. So I was very adamant that he'd made his money honestly. I was fine with it being, sports and hip hop. There's nothing wrong with that. But I was like, no, it's not drugs. It's not anything. Like, he is just a smart businessman. Now, since then, as a vampire, Victor's done lots of crime.
Who hasn't? Who hasn't?
I mean, but who
As
among us hasn't? Yeah. Right, yeah. But that was as a vampire, I've done crime. But he was not a criminal. And at the time, I was just coming off of We're Alive Frontier, and originally I didn't want Victor to be a leader. I was like, I don't want to be the resistance leader of an unruly band of refugees that do not listen to what is in their best interest and keep getting us into trouble. That's what I don't want. Fast forward like 3 episodes.
Undisputed.
And I was Baron because undisputed Baron of the Valley because I'm
Undisputed.
still undisputed. I'm still me, and so here's a funny story, and I've told this before. I went up to Jason during the break in that episode, and I was like, "Hey, Jason, if we kill Abrams, will that ruin your story?" And he was like, "I don't know if you." He's like, "I don't know if you can kill Abrams." I was like, "If we kill Abrams, will that ruin your story?" And he's like, "No, you do whatever you got to do." And I was like, "Cool." And then we went back and we were playing, and I just saw the opportunity to blackmail the guy, and I was like, "Hey, so check this out." So when you watch that happen real time, we had not discussed that at all. I was like, "You don't want the valley anyway. Give it to me, and I'll forget what I saw here tonight." That all happened real time and organically. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
actually ties into what I was going to
That's
ask
amazing.
next. Is that was being Baron of the Valley planned, which you have just answered?
Nope.
It's a good point to ask, because some people think shows like LA by Night, Critical Role, or any of the other streams, some people like to think that they're planned out. Like, there's no way a game could be this fleshed out. It's like, I've always wanted to know, because the storytelling is so great, but I don't like to think that it was planned out, because it takes away from the people involved in it. Because the people involved in it have a lot to do with why the game is great.
It's not planned. It's never planned. I mean, of course, I do not know every single bit of minutia about Critical Role, so obviously I cannot speak for them, but I have a fairly good idea based on what I have seen. Here's the type of things that you know in advance on a good game. This is what I like when I'm playing. This is also what I do when I'm storytelling, is this episode head towards the mountains, or don't go to the beach. This person's going to come. Let them say what they have to say, and if you want to fight them after that, fight them. You know what I mean? Like, we get like points like that, so we're rowing in the same direction. We'll know that.
Yeah.
Like, I'll know things like, Therese is gonna stop by at some point. I'm like, okay, or tonight we're trying to stay in the club. Don't suggest like going off to Griffith Park. Like, we'll get that kind of stuff. Otherwise, 90 to 95% of what you're seeing is real and right there in the moment.
So you really did just blackmail one of the most powerful guys in Los Angeles for a piece of LA.
That was amazing.
You just got a whole lot scarier because you just said that Victor Temple is you. So
Yeah.
I think you had the question.
Yes, I would like to ask, because I'm very interested about the dynamics of the whole coterie. As Baron Victor Temple, how do you see the members of your own coterie? Especially since, well, I don't want to spoil things, so...
No, don't spoil. He loves them all and would die for any of them, And I think he's proven that. I mean, I've jumped in front of each one of them when something terrible was going to happen more than once. I don't think there's nothing he wouldn't do for his friends, and yet, I think there is a very pragmatic streak that he's got that I don't want to say anything that might like damage like future stories, because to tell you the truth, I don't know what's going to happen on season 5 either. I just look at as a storyteller, I look at the board and where the pieces are and be like, well, I know this must be going this way and this must be going that way. It's really great how different we all are. Again, if you haven't seen the end of season 4, where a bunch of us are moving in different directions by the end of season 4. But yeah, it's I like the thing that we've been able to build on. I particularly like some of the interactions we got there in the finale of season 4, and again, when that all happened and that whole thing plays out, which again, is completely unrehearsed. That's just how it went. At the break, Jason checked in and made sure everybody was all right, and he's like, honestly, that was so great. We don't even need a second half, but let's just tape the second half, because who knows, maybe we'll split it up or do something else with it. And then, of course, in the second half, a whole set of other stuff happens. And it was like, oh, okay, whoa, oh, okay, whoa. But that is my nature, is to stay on course and finish the mission. And I don't know when this is going up, but in 2 weeks we have Pirates of Leviathan is going up, where I played a very different character. I play a bugbear gloomstalker who is a sellsword pirate killer, and but I think you will see certain through lines. I personally think Marcide is very different than Victor. You'll have to tell me what you think once you see that show.
I'll hit you on your DMs about that.
I don't want to say too much because I don't want to. I don't want to spoil anything. Yeah, I'll just say that. Say that.
Funny thing you mentioned about Victor Temple having this pragmatic streak, and without spoiling anything, that confrontation about what you did in a prior season to save their lives, the confrontation between you and Annabelle. I wanted to ask you, as a person, if you were in that position, if you were the vampire with those abilities, is that really what you would have done? And is there a part of you that agrees with Annabelle, or is it really you just saying that, nah, I'm saving it? Nice.
No, I saved your life. You're welcome. No, when I'm like, you're still alive because of me. You're welcome. No, that's how I feel in my heart.
That explains that explains how real the interaction felt. Is that you were just you're welcome for being alive. It's just how it is.
Yeah. It's just how it is. I mean, of course. I will not put words in anyone's mouths about how all that went down, but yeah, man, I like, of course that was the move. That was the only move. Yeah, as I can't think of anything I've done as Victor that I thought in my mind, like, I wouldn't do this, but Victor would, It sounds meaner than I think. I don't mean it that way because, like, again, he's like killed a lot of people. However, he's killed people that had it coming. If you notice, every single confrontation Victor gets into, 100% of the confrontations he's had, he's said, we don't have to do this. You know that, right? Like, this doesn't have to go this way. And then they're like, yeah, it does. And I'm like, well, okay, But I think people overlook something, too. Victor has been overmatched by every single one of his opponents. All of his enemies are so much stronger than him. And the only way he survives is by acting like he's not afraid of them. Like, that's the worst thing you can do is show fear. Like, if a grizzly bear charges you, turning and running is the worst thing. So that's how he's made it through these nights so far.
Oh, he's kept the valley. That's how he's kept the valley.
Yeah. Yep. That's it. That's why. That's it. That's how I do it.
Yeah. Yep. By the way, the one that you said that you're telling people now when you're trying to kill them, you don't have to do this type of thing. I mean, you really sound like our DM here, like saying that, making us think that we have free choice and about the things that we're about to do, but
have to do this.
There's another way. There's another way. Yeah.
But I would like
and it's like, oh, okay. We're doing it the hard way. Great. Click, pow. Yep. Okay. Right.
I would like to ask. I mean, because some of the dialogues in Ellie by Night comes naturally. Can you give us an insight in your relationship or dynamic with Mark? The bantering that is happening every time the two has interaction. Is that really good?
Mark who played my son, or Mark Mir when he was Chaz?
No, Mark who played your son. Yeah.
Oh no, Josh Dempster. No, that's all real. You just see it happen real time. Like I'm notorious for not wanting to work things through. I don't want to know. I want you to see my most authentic reaction at the time, because otherwise it'll sound scripted. Some of the other cast members want to like try and discuss it in advance. I won't. I'm like, do your thing. You can tell me what you're going to do, but I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to do. You're going to find out when I find out what's going to happen. That is all 100% off the dome, with one exception. With one exception. In 4 seasons of the show, we have reshot something twice, because usually it was live. And even when we did the epilogues were pre-taped, but for the most part, they were what they were. We've reshot something exactly 2 times. And the first time I called Jasper Sasper was in one of those things that we reshot. And everybody thought it was so funny that when we retaped it, I was like, no, I'm still going to call you Sasper. That's still going to happen.
That was good.
That was scripted. Everything else you've seen off the dome right then.
Speaking of Jasper, actually, I enjoyed the interactions between Jasper and Victor, where he's just complaining. It's like, I didn't want any of this, and it's like, yeah, he really did. It really makes me feel like he didn't. He just wanted to live alone in his sewer, and now everyone knows where. Spoilers! Everyone knows where he lives, and all of this is happening to him. Because I don't want to say it's because of Victor, but Victor's had a huge part in some of the things that has happened to him, and it's also partly because of his loyalty, right? But how does it feel, as because you're so connected to Victor Temple? How does it feel that you have this responsibility that I'm pretty sure, or correct me if I'm wrong, Victor didn't want this responsibility either. Not being the Baron, but just responsibility over these people and how they're acting. Like, does he want the responsibility over them and their emotions?
I mean, yeah, because nobody's making him stay Baron. He could opt out at any time. I think the arc with Jasper has been very interesting, because one of the things, it's been said, but people often overlook, that Jasper's whole thing was he would snatch people for Abrams or anyone else who paid them. Like Jasper was a bag man. That's what he did. So all of this, to me, is the logical outgrowth of his own choices and getting involved with Eva, which, don't get me wrong, I think is beautiful, and every time they're on screen is amazing to me. My favorite scene and sequence out of that entire show, out of everything we've done, was Jasper's season 1 epilogue, when he had to sit there and listen to Chloe talk and couldn't say anything, and all of the emotion Alex was able to show without saying a word. That's my favorite thing that has happened anywhere in this whole series. I think Jason Carl has a saying that I've heard more than once, where he says, my job as storyteller is to represent the world of darkness and what it demands. And I think all of us are where we are, because of that, and ultimately it is probably going to go poorly, because, this is a storytelling game of personal horror, but it's funny though, because another thing, when I created Victor, I expressly wanted to create a vampire who was having a good time, did the crushing burden of eternity. I was like, nah, I'm an immortal nightclub producer, I'm part every single night. No, I'm having a great time, was my character concept for him. So that's why he's kind of been riding high, even when things get bad. He's still afterwards, let's go back to having some fun. So
still got a gold-plated, freaky-looking pistol that can blow you up in one shot.
So let me tell you why the pistol is gold-plated, by the way, because originally it wasn't. Mm-hmm. And Erica got our Hero Forge minis made in the set of the Maharani when we showed those Hero Forge minis.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the diorama. And she designed all the minis, and she got the gun painted gold. The mini showed up with a gold gun, and I was like, "Oh, okay, so."
This is a
I'm
thing.
gonna get the gun gold plated.
Why not?
That's why. Also,
job.
the reason why Victor has a helicopter is also thanks to Erica, because when the Maharaja got destroyed, and we were planning the Maharani, and Jason was asking what I wanted in it, and I was like this and that and this and that, and I was like, oh yeah, and a helipad on the roof, and he's like, what? I was like, a helipad, so I could like fly a helicopter in and like land on the roof, and he was like, and we were talking about it. And I guess Erica heard me say I wanted it, and then she must have walked out because he was like, no, you can't have a helicopter. And I was like, man, I want a helicopter. And then I was gone. I was off filming something when they were planning the rescue operation for Jasper, because we did have to plan it, because Jason's like, if you don't do this right, either he or all of you could die. And Erica, I guess, had heard me say I wanted a helicopter, and she was like, we'll use Victor's helicopter to do X, Y, and Z. And the plan was gone so far along that the helicopter was so pivotal that Jason just let it happen. So that's why Victor has his helicopter. It's because of that.
That was an on-the-spot thing.
Yeah, that's why.
Interesting point on this is the whole dynamics, Victor, the Coterie, and just the general world of darkness being so bleak and kind of consuming. It's a philosophical game at its core. It's like, what do you do when you are the monster? What do you do? How do you hold on to yourself when you know, and it is an inevitable truth, that you are a monster? So let's try to. I want to get just a slight bit philosophical here. Is how do you see Victor dealing with that? And because I ask, because this is something that some people might have to deal with, is their own monsters. Because the concept of VTM is that there is a beast. There is something inside you that is a monster that wants to take over, that is trying to just kill everything you love. And some people, especially those who are living with some sort of mental illness, deal with that monster in real life. So if you could give the advice to these people, it's like, how, obviously none of us are trained professionals, but what is kind of a way to deal with that sort of thing, to deal with fear and anxiety and just general emotion that you don't want to feel, this negativity inside you?
The simplest answer I would give is, remember, you don't have to believe everything you think. I mean, just because the thought pops into your head doesn't make it true. And focus on the things that you want to believe and that you want to be the case. Because things like doubt and fear and anxiety, everybody feels. One of my favorite quotes is from Masoyama, who was a karate master in the early 20th century, is, your opponent's not a god. If you're afraid, so is he. You know, I think a lot of times people mistakenly believe that everyone else has it together. Everyone else is so smart and so confident and not worried and no fear and no doubt. That's not true. I mean, unless they're like sociopaths, everybody does. It's just, you just ignore it and keep moving forward and do what you have to do. There is a process. You can find the video online called Big Mind. And the name of the video is A Journey Through Your Interiors. It's the Big Mind process. And it's about 3 hours long. So it's long, but I mean, we all watch streams every week that they're that long or longer.
Yep.
And it's not a guided meditation. That's the wrong description. But it's, you just get talked through meeting different parts of yourself. Because we are an accumulation of so many things. We're accumulation of things our parents told us, things society have told us, things friends have told us, things we saw on TV and movies. And a lot of the voices that we hear, most of the voices that we hear, are not us. It's things we've inherited. And the Big Mind process takes you through meeting those, and eventually, at the end of the process, you meet the real you, and it's incredible. It's astonishing. I go through the process 3 or 4 times a year. I just sit and do the whole thing over again. So I highly recommend that, just in general. But yeah, it's Yeah, obviously we could talk for hundreds of hours about dealing with negative emotions, but I would bring it down to that it's one, you don't have to believe everything you think, and two, don't be afraid to ask yourself, what would someone you admire do? What would your best self do? If you were being your best in this moment right now, how would that person act? And then do that. Like we were talking before about the therapeutic benefits of these games, is you can step outside of yourself and be like, well, it's not me, it's this heroic conception of me. But that heroic conception of you is still you because it's still born out of you. Like something in you was capable of imagining, personifying that. So create that person outside of you and then step into that if you have to. But yeah, just keep moving forward and realize that to fall 7 times is to rise 8. Life begins today. That's Bodhidharma, kids.
Yep.
Yeah.
Jade, the thing you want to ask?
Yeah. As a new player, I would like to ask if you have tips about those who aspire to become DMs or players, because some people get daunted or intimidated with the idea. So how would you ease them into the process?
Oh, do it is the first thing. Like, I mean, if you're thinking about playing or DMing or streaming or podcasting or writing or anything, do it. Just do it. Start and do it. The fastest way to get into it is you pick a movie or a TV show that is closest to your genre. So if D&D, we'll say it's Lord of the Rings. If it's vampire, it's True Blood or Underworld or literally every werewolf and vampire story from the last 25 years. And let's pick a character that you like. So it's like, hey, who's your favorite character in Lord of the Rings? Legolas. Cool. You're a wood elf ranger now. No problem. So imagine that you're sitting inside of your wood cabin. Somebody knocks on the door of the cabin. What would you like to do? Of course, they say, I go open the door. You open the door. No one's there. What would you like to do? Oh, I need to go out and look around. You're in. You're playing the game. It's that simple. I would advise you against comparing yourself to other people. Like, don't compare yourself to Mercer. Don't compare yourself to, Jasmine Boulard. Don't compare yourself to me, because you look and you're like, I can't do what those people do, and you can't. You can't do what I do. You can't do what Mercer does. You can't do what Jasmine does, but we can't do what you do. We can't tell your stories. Only you can tell your stories. And you owe it to the world to tell your stories, to shine your own unique light, because holding that back and keeping it to yourself is actively harming the human race. The joy you can spread must be spread. So yeah, don't hold back. And if you just have a good time that lasts an evening with a handful of friends, that is just as valid as telling some sweeping epic that millions of people participate in. Because at the end of the day, it's still just the person across from you. So yeah, do it. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about all the rest of it. Just get your friends together, roll some dice, have a good time.
Always about the enjoyment at the end of the day, right? It's about how you enjoy your game, how you like it. And there's a lot of talk on the internet, and it's kind of saddening about the Matt Mercer effect, which is one, a compliment because it acknowledges how good he is, but it's also disheartening for a lot of people to even start, because a lot of people like to compare them. It's not even them comparing themselves, it's a lot of people like to compare them to Critical Role like it's a benchmark or other streams, because it's a little off-putting. So I want to get your opinion on that. How do you see that, and how would you talk to someone who is being, not that they're judging themselves, but people are judging them? It's easy, to get over it, but how would you, what would you say to a kind of person like that, like, who are being judged for it because they're putting it out there?
I never heard anyone say, I'll never be Michael Jordan, therefore I will not play basketball at all. It's just the mindset's alien to me. And the only reason I've done the things I've been able to do is because I'm immune to that. Like, I'm not competing against anybody but me. Another one of my favorite quotes from Jigoro Kano, the founder of Judo, is, you don't have to be better than your opponent, you just have to be better than yesterday. And I do think there is this false equivalency in some people's minds that if it's not CR, it's nothing, or if it's not whatever their Brennan Lee Mulligan, it's nothing, or whatever their ideal top storyteller is. But I know all of those people, and none of them feel that way. So I'm like, if they don't think that way, why should you? Nah, it's again, I think the usefulness of looking at a CR or something of that caliber is you just see what can be done and pay attention to the things you like about it and the things that you don't like about it. Take from a person's style what you enjoy and build upon it, and take from what their style that you don't enjoy and build upon that. It's again, to me, it's like being a musician. Nobody again out there is like, I can't sing like Lady Gaga, therefore I will not sing. Who cares? Tell your story. Because again, Mercer cannot tell your story ever. So you do you. Don't even worry about trying to do him. And anybody that comes into your chat and tries to start comparing you to Mercer, just be like, hey, CR is Thursday nights. This is us now. You know?
That's
keep
good
rolling.
advice. That's good advice.
Yeah. That's all right. I mean, my show airs right before Critical Role on purpose. I don't care. Like at all. You know? So I'm like,
Also,
yeah,
because of time
let's go.
zones, it keeps my Friday busy. Watching that and watching Critical Role
yeah.
all day.
Hey, see, I don't know when this is going up, but our season finale is airing tomorrow as the season 2
Yep,
finale.
I
But
was
we are
wondering.
coming back for a third season.
Good, I'm waiting for it. DJ, you wanted to say something?
Mm-hmm.
Before my question, I would like to let you know that that we do notice some of the messages that you want to put across with the character. For example, Victor Temple and breaking social stereotypes of businesses being legal. We do notice those type of things, and I really appreciate the way you created your character like that. My question is, some people don't know that you wrote a book, which is 49 Secrets.
Man, look at y'all having done your research. What? That whole thing.
I want to buy the book,
Yeah.
but it's out of print. And
Yeah,
I would like to
I'll
ask.
send you a PDF.
I would like to
Mhm.
ask, with the pandemic that is happening right now, can you share one or two things from that book that could be relevant today?
Yeah. I was talking about this earlier when somebody else, and I have to be careful how I phrase this, because if I phrase it poorly, it ends up stressing people out instead of making them feel better. I would just point out two things. And I do not mean to make light of the fact that this is an incredibly difficult time for some people. This is a catastrophic time for some people, and it's a hard time for everybody. Two things. One, when life gets back to normal, whatever that looks like, when we are going back out, back in the office, working, whatever, you will miss the simplicity of this time. You will miss the time when all you had to do was get out of bed and walk right over there and turn on the computer and it was on. So even though we might be quarantined against our will, at least those of us that are responsible adults,
Exactly.
Exactly.
There is still a value in the simplicity of this time. And the second thing is, it will never, ever, ever be any easier to do that thing you want to do than it is now. That book you want to write, that screenplay, that song you want to write, if you want to start streaming, it will never be any easier than this. You have every possible distraction has been removed. And you have, there's only one thing that every human being on earth is equal in, and that is time. We all have 168 hours in a week. You, me, Barack Obama, Oprah Winfrey, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, 168 hours in a week. So there is enough time for anything you want to do if you manage it properly. There may not be every time in a day, maybe not even in a week, but across a month, several months, you can do it. That is why I accomplish so much, because I pay attention to how I'm spending my time. Now, that being said, this is an unusual time in the history of mankind. There's been plenty of plagues and pandemics in the past, but never on a scale where we were all completely aware of what was happening everywhere. That we were completely aware of every tiny little bit of suffering all over the planet all at once. And that is overwhelming and that is painful. And if you find yourself in a place where the only thing you can do is go to the couch, sit there and eat ice cream and watch Netflix, that is fine. I'm not here to make you feel guilty or make you feel wrong about that. You do whatever you got to do to preserve your own mental and emotional health. I would just say in the midst of that, if you can find the wherewithal to write a sentence, just one, it will add up. The time is going to pass whether or not you make the most of it. So the thing that you want to do, start picking away at it, because this is your time to do it. And that is my advice for keeping sane in the midst of this, is trying at least to be productive and recognizing, again, once we're back in the office and going to parties that we don't really want to go to and having social obligations and being pulled this way and that way and this way and that way, that the simplicity of this time is actually a blessing if you see it as such.
Yeah, that's a really good point, is how to handle things. I mean, we started streaming because of this. Like, we're bored out of our minds. We need to do something with our time. Oh, let's go ahead.
Yeah, man. Lots of. Let me tell you something. In about a year, there's going to be so many literal and figurative quarantine babies that came out of this time. Some actual human beings that are going to be conceived during this time. But again, books and movies and songs and shows and things and games that people are just chipping away at now, which are going to see the light of day in a year or two, are going to be amazing. Shakespeare wrote most of his plays when he was in quarantine. Isaac Newton created algebra when he was in quarantine. We have no idea what amazing things are going to come out of this time. You know? So I myself am looking forward to it.
And, sorry, we're going a little bit over, but I just wanted to ask you a couple more things. Just one thing is, some people may not know, but your Indiegogo film, Dear America from a Black Guy, I have not been able to catch up if it's out already. I think it's still being funded, correct? Or
yeah, we're still crowdfunding. I mean, as of the time of this recording, we got a week left. Next Tuesday is the last day. Because I think actually Wednesday morning Pacific is the cutoff. So basically next Tuesday is the last day. Got a week left.
I just wanted to ask, to step away from tabletop for a bit and get a little more personal, is that there's a lot of issues happening in the US. And not everyone seems to get that right now. So if you have a message you want to say, if you wanted to get something across relating to that film, relating to the problems, what would you want to say? Get a message across. Yelling
at each other isn't working. And to remember that those people, however you conceive of those people, are still human beings. People are literally dying now. Because things that should not be politicized are politicized, and it is so important to own the other side that human lives don't matter. And the point behind the documentary is to remind everyone of just the basic humanity of the other side, because right now even that's lacking. And if you can't even sit at the table and admit, it's like, okay, you're a person, and I'm a person, there's nothing else to discuss. And if you can get to that point, then it's like, well, all right, we're both people. There's some things that come along with that. We all want certain things. You want a roof over your head, food in your belly, your kids to be safe, your kids to have a better life than you had. You know, start building off of those things that we all have in common. I have no illusions about a world where we all agree, because that world has never existed and arguably never will. But the divide is growing so great right now that no matter what happens in November for our election, and I think it's pretty obvious, I hope that that orange buffoon loses in a historically crushing defeat, personally. But even if that happens, whatever happens, if he finds a way to cheat or win, if he loses next year, the people that lost aren't leaving. This rift is not going to go away unless someone or many someones start trying to do something to work to bridge it. So that's what I'm trying to do. Just get people to at least remember that we're all still human beings, even more than we're all Americans, that we're all humans. Because I think when you keep at the forefront the idea that those people are humans, you will act differently and proceed differently, and it changes the conversation. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Right. That's a really good message to end on. But sorry, I just have one last thing that I really want to ask while you're still here with us.
Mhm.
Forgive me for the overtime.
Yeah, man.
But
Yeah.
bringing it back to your DMing experience, 4 years of running games, because these two will tell you that I'm a sadist. Because they made some bad decisions
Absolutely.
that got some orphans killed, and I told them it's not my fault. You told them to leave the city in a time of crisis and war, but they left and they died. I wanted to ask you, like, how do you handle consequences to actions? Because you did say that you're running the 20th level games, and the way you run through it is like the consequences of Superman crushing someone's neck, for example. Like, what are the consequences of Superman just killing a guy? So how do you approach consequences in game? Like, is there a line, or do you just let them do what they do and it reacts accordingly?
Well, let me say a couple things. I know I said I ran that one game from 1 to 20, but I mean, I've been DMing for 30 years. All things being equal, and I'm not saying this about you, but all things being equal, people that say, I'm a consequences DM, those people tend to be assholes who were trying to just put their people through a grinder just because it makes them feel good. I'm not that person. However, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Like Jason said, I'm here to represent the world and what it demands. And so if you kill, it's the classic thing of, hey, there's a red dragon that lives up at the top of the mountain. Cool, we're gonna go kill the dragon. Great. Turns out the dragon was the only thing keeping the storm giants at bay. Now there's a storm giant invasion. Oh man, it is always attempting to continue to ratchet the pressure, but then you need to reach a point where then all that pressure gets released, and then it comes back into it again. I try and bring as much realism as I can to even fantastical situations. So when I have them fight foes that are intelligent, I have them fight like they're intelligent. They're aware of the fact that that's the healer. Kill them first. They're capable of setting ambushes. They're capable of running for their lives. They're capable of seeking revenge. That's why I also try to have foes that be capable of being reasoned with. Like, they may want a deal that you don't want. That dragon might be like, cool, I'll let everybody go if you give me a firstborn child. Like, that makes sense to the dragon, But I do think it is important, back to that point that I was saying, that your actions and inactions have an impact. That impact doesn't always have to be a positive one. So, again, if you set the story hook of you got to rescue the princess because somebody's going to kill her at midnight, and then you don't, well, the princess is dead. Maybe now that means war is going to break out in the countryside. You got a different set of problems. Same thing. If they were like, hey, orphans, leave, it's a time of crisis, I probably would have rolled the orphans up in the countryside too, or have them come back as enemies later.
Oh my god.
Yeah. One thing I did in that same campaign that we ran so long, and I've alluded to in some other campaigns, if I had one that ran long enough, I would do again, is they had crossed a demon lord fairly early, and all of their enemies that they had killed, the demon was essentially offering a chance to come back, and started building up the Legion of Doom to their Justice League. So years down the road, I had them run into basically everyone over again that, of course, had been leveled up to be appropriate enemies. That it's like all of these people that you killed and crossed over that died hating you are all back again. Roll initiative. You know?
Excuse me while I take some
And
notes.
that worked
Oh
out.
my god.
Excuse me while I take some notes on
Sounds
this.
familiar, by the way. That sounds familiar in our
Please
campaign.
don't give him ideas.
No, that was
Please
not
don't
me.
give him ideas.
No, do it.
It's just funny because at one point they swindled a potion salesman to believing that this rapier is magical in exchange for all the
Mhm.
potions that he had, and it worked because of the dice. A few sessions in later, he came back as an extremely powerful warlock that tried to kill all of them.
There it is, you know. But I mean, those are delightful adventure hooks, you know. That makes them feel like they have a place in the world and how it's all growing. I mean, that's what Noseer's been. Noseer began as my main enemy in Theogony of Kairos, and spoiler alert, they kill him. And then because of some like time shenanigans, an evil god brought him back in the finale. Because we actually shot the finale for Gen Con. And they did some things to get around him. And then at Descent, when I played in Chris Perkins' game, I played as Noseer trying to escape the underworld, and I did. I made it through that whole adventure with 1 hit point. And that's why when we did A Darkened Wish, when they went to Waterdeep, he was there. Because that was the end. When we got out of Avernus, we ended up back in Waterdeep, and he was there. So that like line for his character, that was how it was traced along, and I think that kind of thing is neat personally. But yeah, it's when in doubt. One of my favorite quotes was Stephen Moffat on Doctor Who when he was talking about what happened with Donna, which again I won't spoil, although it's been like 10-15 years by now. I think the statute of limitations is up, but he said in an interview, he's like, that was the worst thing I could think to do to Donna, and so therefore I had to do it. You know, where you're like, oh, this is my style is I make sure there is a way out. I make sure there's always a solution, and then I make it as terrible as I possibly can, because they're gonna come up with stuff, and the dice are gonna do things, and then
they have to work.
That's
for
the
it.
only way it feels good to win. The only way it feels good.
These guys are crying because I just got justified for everything I've done to them. It's funny you
There it
mentioned.
It was all our fault.
It feels like that sometimes. Yeah, hey,
Exactly.
there you go.
It's funny you mentioned Noseer. I loved when you were being introduced into Descent, and it's like, ooh, the way he's dressed is like Noseer, and then you had to roll dice like 1 hit point. Like,
Yeah.
Matt Mercer's line just screamed it all.
It was like, well, okay.
Matt Mercer just screamed it all. It's like, you're as alive as a hamster.
True.
Oh.
At least he was a miniature giant space hamster. But
True.
yes.
Um,
That was good. Yeah, if you've never seen that stream, you should watch that.
The whole
the
Descent,
that
that
table
was
game we
great.
did. That was wild. It was wild. Yeah.
So we're done taking up your time. B-Day Volters, everyone. You will have been amazing. I really need a soundboard, but you're amazing. Thank you for giving us your time and the advice you provided. I'm personally excited to watch the season finale, as well as what happens in LA by Night. When exactly? I do not know the schedule. When does the season 5 of LA by Night start? No definite time yet. All right.
It's the world's literally on fire. So
yeah, that's understandable.
You know,
and
at some point, it's going to happen, but it's just a matter of when.
And the Dimension 20 show. That's going to be interesting.
Oh yeah, no, that Pirates of Leviathan. That is the 16th. That is exactly 2 weeks. 2 weeks from now. That's gonna be a whole thing. Yeah, enjoy that.
Brennan Lee Morgan.
I will only.
Yeah, no.
I will only say my character ended up being much, much worse than I thought he was going to be. I had a thing in my mind, and literally the first words out of my mouth, I'm like, "Oh, he's terrible. Oh, okay. Oh, all right. Okay. Yeah, here we go. We're terrible."
You said yourself, it be like that sometimes. So
it bees like that sometimes. Yep. So
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. If you could just DM me all the links to everything you want to give out so I can put them in the descriptions. Thank you so much for your time.
I'll do it.
And we'll see everyone next week, I think. Thank you, Dave, for everything.
You guys have a good one.
You too.